Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's SANS webcast. You can write an Infosec book. My name is Carol, author of SANS. Today's featured speaker is Ted Demopoulos, SANS Principal Instructor. He will be moderating. If during the webcast you have any questions for our presenter, please enter them into the questions window at any time. Please note that this webcast is being recorded, and a copy of the slides and recording of this webcast will be available for viewing later today and can be found on the SANS registration page. And with that, I'd like to hand the webcast over to Ted.
Thank you, Carol. Welcome everybody to You Can Write an Infosec book. Now, I'm quite certain you can, and maybe the emphasis should be on the you part of this, because not that long ago, I was kind of the poster child of the least likely person to write a book. I didn't like writing. I was not a good writer. In school, which was a long time ago, admittedly, I did everything to avoid writing. I was even a math major because there's no papers and there's no labs to write up. But I actually found writing isn't that hard. And I actually like writing when nobody's making me do that. Yeah, it only took me a few decades to figure that out. So we're going to talk about everything that goes into writing a book, specifically an Infosec book, both the writing part, which we'll get to later in the presentation. We'll destroy some myths that stop people from writing books a lot, and talk about different approaches to get that book out there. So, some book facts. Various surveys show 81% of people, I've seen the number up to 83%, want to write a book. I'm going to guess it's closer to 100% here, since you're in a talk on how to write a book. And I'm going to guess in our community as well, it's over 81%. Now, almost anyone can. Certainly, if you're here, you are capable of this, but very few will. Less than 1% of people write a book. Probably one of the few places you'll hear, be part of the 1% or the less than 1%. Now, you're not going to get rich writing a book. You're just not. Some people have. J.K. Rowling, who wrote the Harry Potter sequence. Dan Brown, who lives literally, maybe 4 miles away from me. He maybe moved a little bit. Who wrote the Da Vinci Code? Went to high school with him. He's made hundreds of millions, but you're not going to, and I'm not either. However, having a book can lead to money because of the opportunities having a book. It's definitely more work than you think. So I've been writing this morning on my next book, which I've gotten about 85% done right now of a solid first draft. And every time I do this, I forget how much work is involved. But you know what? It's a lot of work, but it's way more possible than you think. And we're going to talk about ways to get head starts in writing a book and ways to make it easier. In some cases, you could write a book without actually writing, and we'll get to that. Now, the first book I wrote was about a decade ago. It's like 14 years now. It was on social media. I wrote it with a co-author, and I remember being told by my agent that for a first-time author, if you sell 5,000 books, that's phenomenal. That's a grand slam. A lot of books only sell about 200 copies. You don't need to sell a lot of copies to have a big impact. And obviously, the more specialized the book, the smaller the potential audience. If you write a book on, dieting for fat middle-aged people, that's, by the way, probably a bad title, your potential audience is much larger than if you write a book on, I don't know, taking advantage of heap overflows in some architecture, right? Now, I said writing is more work than you think. It really is the easy part. It is figuring out what you're going to write, figuring out how you're going to get it published, and getting people to read the book. That's a bigger deal, right? That's important. And I'm still not sure if I love writing books. There's some parts of it I really enjoy, right? I'm on book number 4, formal published. You can hold book number 4. And I will say there's some parts I really enjoy, and some parts they just work. They just are. But having written a book is awesome. I love having written books, and I might actually be writing 2 books simultaneously right now. I've got an idea for a second one I may be starting this week. So to a lot of people, look at me, write a book? No way, I can't do that. There's some massive book myths. So let's just talk about those briefly and quickly and how to get around them. First of all, you need to be a great writer. Let's just say you need to be a good writer. The last 2 papers I wrote for high school, I know because when my parents moved about a decade ago, we found them in the house, were horrific. They were horrible. Now there's Hemingway. He allegedly was a great writer, and the stuff I've read by him was really impressive. He had editors, right? There's a saying that whoever acts as their own editor has a fool for an editor. You don't edit your own stuff. If you're professionally publishing something, they probably have a bunch of editors that are going to edit it. You can hire editors as well. They're not expensive. There's also the concept of a ghostwriter. Now, a ghostwriter writes the book for you. We don't do that a lot at Infosec. I've seen it done a couple times, though. The idea is it's your thoughts, your ideas, and there are people that have great thoughts, have got great ideas, have got great things to say, but they're just not writers, or they're too busy, or right. So there's nothing wrong with a ghostwriter. That's actually the concept. They write it, but it's your brain matter in the book. And by the way, you can learn to write well. Right? It's not that hard. I did. So to get better at writing, which will make you more likely to write a book, just write more. Yeah, you get better at writing by writing. Now, if you're as bad as I am, that might not be sufficient. It just might not. So, simple example. Remember the Unabomber? By the way, the Unabomber was also named Ted, like me. It's about the only similarity, except in the Unabomber's manifesto, there's some things he got wrong. There was some syntax, there were some idioms, there were some common sayings he got wrong. He could have written forever. He would have kept getting those wrong. Just like I found out, about 5 years ago, there's a word I've been misspelling and mispronouncing my entire life. Somebody had to tell me that. So getting feedback on your writing can help. Now, if you're writing a book, you will have an editor. You need an editor, so you will get some. But if you're really bad like I am, you might want to get better beforehand, right? And again, even the best writers have editors. A lot of things you could do. You could take a creative writing class. I know there's one at the local community college, right? Just something as simple as volunteering to take minutes in meetings you go to. We probably all sit in more meetings than we want to, right? There's not only enormous power in taking the meetings that you're writing. Start a blog. A friend of mine who was planning on writing a book was involved in a charity event, and they were on the board of this charity event, and they started a temporary blog up to this charity event. And you know what? It was a throwaway blog. It didn't matter that much. I have another friend ran a marathon. He was actually very motivating for me to do it, and he blogged about his training, and he did it semi-anonymously. He was just getting practice writing. Now, if you need somebody to look over what you write just to make you better, you can hire a college student, including real cheaply. I'm in a college town. I have hired college students before to do things, and I know at least one of you on this call has a student intern. They'll work cheap, they're good, and what they usually want is a good recommendation afterwards. Now, when I say work cheap, you should pay people fairly. Fiverr.com, right? You can buy services for $5 a Fiverr. Now it's a little more expensive, or sometimes you'll pay 5 or some multiple of 5. You can get a real cheap editor. Sometimes they're foreign, but they're native English speakers, right? Just to help you. Now remember, you don't need to be a good writer, but it helps. Now people also think you need to be an expert. Right? You've heard this term before. They wrote the book on the topic. Well, how do you think they learned enough to write the book? Do you think they knew everything before they write the book, or there was some research involved? Now, generally, you need some base knowledge. So let's say I wanted to write a book on, I don't know, something in genetics. I know next to nothing about genetics. I couldn't write most books on genetics. I don't have that base knowledge. If I was fascinated about genetics, could I write a genetics book for the layperson? Yeah, because it's a technical field, right? I'm technical. I'm a technical person. Let's say I wanted to write a book on something in security I know almost nothing about. How about home security systems? I'm a security guy, right? I could do research. Or let's say I wanted to write it on memory analysis. I know very little about forensic memory analysis. I played with a couple of the tools quite literally, but I have the background to figure that out. Now, also, you could use expert sources, right? If you want to write a book, it is amazing how easy it is to get people to talk to you. So if I'm writing about home security systems, I'd go to Burns Security Solutions in Dover, New Hampshire. An old friend of mine runs it. And we don't talk very much as we're like busy early. But if I'm writing a book and going to quote him, like he'd be doing backflips. Or if I wanted to write something on, let's say, advanced memory forensics, which I'd have to learn, that wouldn't be that hard because I know people that know this really well, right? And they'd be happy to talk to me. So you don't need to be an expert. You will become more of an expert as you write it, absolutely. Also, you have to be famous or like well known. Okay, if you're going for a book contract from a major publisher, or actually even any publisher, it helps. It helps a lot. But you don't need a contract, and you can get one without being famous or well known. And there are some famous authors that were not famous until they wrote a book. Now, if you're already famous, let's say you're a celebrity or you're a politician or somehow you're well known, yeah, it definitely helps you in getting a contract. It does. Right. And then once you've got the book, it will definitely help make you better known, help you get a great job or keep a great job or getting consulting gigs and so forth. Now, before I wrote my last book, someone made me sit down. I didn't want to do it and actually literally write down why I'm writing the book, why I want the book, the goals of the book, and so forth. It's like, I don't need to do that. It was very valuable. There are lots of good reasons. One is definitely to promote yourself, right? It can be incredible for your career. To generate goodwill. The book I'm working on right now is primarily to make good things happen. It's a book on how to be a consultant. It'll probably be called Infosec Consulting 101 or something like that. And I honestly think entrepreneurs and consultants are making the world a better place by doing things that they think are valuable. To move towards rockstar status, right? To spread ideas. My book on the right, Infosec Rockstar, I wrote primarily to spread ideas. And by the way, I went to over 100 expert sources. I've talked to over 100 people, probably more like 200 or 300 that I consider to be rock stars. Right? Most of them don't consider themselves to be, but to me, they really impress me. And the last reason, it's absolutely valid reason, just because you want to. I want to write a book. That's a good enough reason, right? Now, that doesn't mean you sit down and write anything, but just because you want to is a good enough reason. Remember, 80-something% of people want to write a book and just want it. That's a good enough reason. Now, today, it's so much easier to publish a book. Let me go back a few slides real quickly. Where's Hemingway? There he is. Apparently, he sat in Havana, Cuba with a manual typewriter. He'd sit with a bottle of whiskey or rum and 2 packs of unfiltered cigarettes, and he'd make himself write all night long. I'd suggest you skip the cigarettes, although I'm not judging anybody. I can't really write well when I'm drinking, but we don't have manual typewriters anymore, right? We don't. Well, they still exist, but it's so much easier with computers and so forth. It's so much easier. Now, self-publishing itself is very easy today. It used to be called vanity publishing. And I remember this friend of my father's wrote a book. And the topic was fine. The book was horrible. And there used to be an enormous stigma to self-publishing because of some of the really bad books that came out, but not anymore. There's some awesome self-published books. I may self-publish my next book. I'm not sure, right? And even if you self-publish, if it's a hit, sometimes a commercial publishing house, as they're called, will pick it up afterwards, which may or may not be your goal. You do Kindle only. Now, that's pretty easy. You do print on demand. Now, print on demand is really a technology used primarily in self-publishing. CreateSpace has been the big name. There are others. CreateSpace is now part of Kindle Direct Publishing. You need to do it all yourself, where you literally do it all yourself, including going to actual printers and getting quotes on what it'll cost to print the book in various ways. And that's not done as commonly these days, but it can be done. Still, commercially published book by a traditional New York City publisher, an established publisher, will give you more credence. It will. That doesn't mean it's the only way to go by any means. My first three books, well, all of my books so far, all of my official books have been commercially published. You're still in charge of marketing your book. You still got to make it sell, right? The publisher just gets the physical book into physical bookstores and the electronic copy into other places. Of course, you get the physical bookstore into Amazon and Barnes and Noble online and so forth. Still your job to get it to sell. So Kindle-only books are pretty simple, right? Could be shorter than a traditional book. It's still a real book. And a screenshot looks just like a book. It is a book. You absolutely have to hire a professional editor. You have to if you want a decent job done. I had 2 professional editors for my last book. Part of that's, I'm not going to say it's a lie. My sister is a retired professional editor. She did the first pass. Then I hired somebody to do the second pass. The book cover, you don't do it yourself. You hire a professional to do it. People absolutely judge a book by its cover. And it's got to look great when it's just a thumbnail as well, and professional book publishers understand this. You know, if you pick up a book, whether it's you physically pick it up or electronically and look around at it and look at the back of it, and the back has the so-called cover copy written on it. Do you know that there are people whose job is to write cover copy for books? You can write it yourself and you might do an okay job. With a commercial publisher, they're not going to have you do that. They're going to have somebody, that's their job. They're into that. They like it. They go crazy. They like that. What I did with my last book, which wasn't Kindle only, it was commercially published, is I had friends who were interested. I gave them the whole draft to read when it was pretty solid and got feedback. I'm not going to do that again. You know why? Because even though people wanted to, that's just giving people like a lot to do. What I'm going to do, and I may do this in the next couple of weeks, 3 weeks, I have a bunch of friends that are interested. I'll just say, hey, interested in reviewing a chapter? Want to just give me feedback? Not editing necessarily, but telling me what they think. Do I have some stuff I should cut out? Is there things I missed? What do they think? And so forth. Now, let's talk about the traditional model, which is still extremely valid today. With the traditional model, the first thing you do is you do not write the book. You do not. Not for nonfiction. You write a book proposal, and it's got to be a great book proposal. We're going to take a look at excerpts of a successful book proposal in a few minutes, okay? Now, you might think that killer book proposal is going to be about a killer book. It's going to be a great book idea. No. What the book is about is at most tertiary importance. Yeah, it doesn't matter that much. It matters. It's significant what it's about, but it's not the most important thing at all. One of the most important things, and again, we'll look at these in detail, are as the author, your platform. A platform, that's your reach. Do you tweet? Do you speak? Are you blogging? How do people know about you? Right? They use this term platform. What kind of a reach you have so you can let people know about the book. You go, you find a literary agent. We'll talk about how to find a literary agent soon. Literary agents tend to hang out with publishers. They know publishers well. They have lunch, they have drinks, they go to conferences together. And a great literary agent, if they've got a good relationship with someone at a publishing house, often they'll maintain that throughout their career when they might go to different publishing houses. So they know them really well, and they know where your book will fit in well. And what do? They shop your proposal around to traditional publishers. They know which ones are the most likely to accept it and pay the most money for it and so forth. Now, in most fields, this is exactly how it works. And this still works in our field, right? This is not a bad way to do it at all. Now, let's say I wanted to write a book and have it published for, I don't know, Doubleday or Penguin or one of the really major publishing houses. In general, you can't send them a proposal because, well, you can do whatever you want, but they won't read it. They will not look at your proposal unless there is an agent who's in charge. Why? Because if an agent believes it is worth publishing and they're friends with the agent, they trust the agent, then that probably is, right? There's a good chance. So major publishing houses use agents to vet book proposals, because I'll tell you, they have so many proposals thrown at them, and I have seen some truly atrocious, nonsensical proposals. So they shop it around. Now, an agent only gets paid after they sell your book proposal, only after they sell it. There are people running around claiming they're literary agents that want money up front. That's not how it works, okay? All kinds of scams. Now, does that mean if somebody wants money up front that they are a scam? No, not necessarily, right? But traditionally, a literary agent gets paid when they sell your book, when they get a book contract for you, normally 15%. So how do you find a literary agent? Well, one might just come and knock on your door, but don't count on it. It's happened. Look at books you like, right? If you're writing a book, hopefully you at least occasionally read books or at least look at them. If there was a literary agent, and there often is, they will be mentioned in the book. Maybe in the very beginning, thanks for my wife for keeping my children away so it's quiet so I can work, and my children for being my motivation, and my dog for sitting at my feet while I wrote, and to my lovely literary agent, Wendy Keller. Wendy's actually the literary agent I've used for a couple of books. Now, when you find literary agents for books that you like, do some open source intelligence on the literary agent. Make sure you know something about them before you contact them. Make sure they're interested in books like yours. For example, my literary agent, I didn't use it for the last book, I did it for the first two, quite specifically states on her website there's some sorts of books she doesn't even want to hear about. If you're channeling extraterrestrials to write your book, she literally says that. I did last time, like, she doesn't want to hear from you. As I said, publishers and agents get pitched all kinds of crazy ideas. Now, you send them a physical query letter. It still works this way. Why? Because these people are very old school. I'd use email too, and it's important to follow up, right? Follow up with them afterwards. And the follow-up could be an email, could be a phone call if you're into that. I know lots of people that have tried sending out just, dozens and dozens or
Hey, Ted, it's Carol. I'm not hearing you right now. If you attendees could let me know if it's just on my end. I see someone else ask the same question. Okay. Yeah, Ted, we seem to have lost your audio. Oh, looks like he's offline. Let me send him a quick message. Sorry for the interruption here. All right, let's just give Ted a moment here. Thanks for your patience. All right, I'm still trying to get a hold of Ted. In the meantime, you can find your CEUs for all completed webcasts by logging into your SANS portal account. Navigate to your account dashboard, then click My Webcasts. You can then download your CEU on the right-hand side of the web page. Ted, it looks like you're back.
All right. Are my slides up?
No. Yes, they are now. The literary agent 2.
My primary and my secondary both went down at the same time. All right.
That's a bad omen.
That's a bad omen. All right. So with a literary agent, you find literary agents that might work, right? Do some open source intelligence. Go check them out. And then you send a query letter and you follow up. Traditionally, we send a physical a physical letter. They still expect that. I suggest you use email as well. If by any chance you can get a personal introduction from a current client of theirs, from a current author, that's awesome as well. You find a book you like, right? You see who the literary agent is. Maybe because in the front of the book they're thanked or something, like their name's in there somewhere. Say, hey, I know this author, or we follow each other on Twitter or something like that. Personal introduction works phenomenally well. Now, in Infosec specifically, in some other fields as well, but in Infosec specifically, a lot of significant publishers, you can approach them directly, right? You can. They want you to. So I spent maybe 5 minutes on Google getting this together, probably less. O'Reilly, right? O'Reilly Associates, one of my favorite publishing houses. They've got a work with us page. Now, they don't actually have a sample book proposal or a format there, but you can get one from them. They want to talk to you. No Starch. I'm an enormous fan of No Starch, right? They've got a Write For Us page. Singress, which is actually an imprint of, I don't know if I can pronounce it, Elsevier, right? Their books range from great to they really should have had another editor, right? But it's just 3 examples. You can definitely approach them directly, and that is a wonderful thing to do. I've done that. It hasn't worked for me, but I've done that, and I've gotten some positive feedback and some interest, but have gone with others. Now let's talk about the book proposal. Okay, a lot of publishers have specific formats. For example, O'Reilly, I think all 3 of them do on the previous page. That makes it relatively easy. You take the format, you fill it in. The 2 most important parts, again, it's not what the book is about. It's got to be in a field that they publish books in, obviously. The 2 most important things, and these are in no specific order, are competitive information, right? What are similar books? You say, well, my book isn't like any other books. It's like, it better be, because they're not going to publish it. If there are similar books, we'll look at an example in a second, they're similar books, that means there is a market. That means people are buying books like that because there's a market for those books. Also, the marketing information is critical, right? The marketing information is how you're going to get the book to sell. That's absolutely critical. So with nonfiction, which is what we're talking about, you do not write the book. You write a book proposal first, then the book next. I'm going to stress that a lot. Write it a lot. Book proposal first. You write the book next. Or you might be writing a book that nobody wants to read. Yeah. So why do you write the book proposal first, other than the fact that agents and publishers absolutely require one? Well, for self-publishing, and I'm going to mention this again later, it's strongly required, strongly recommended. You better do some OSINT, right? You don't want to write the same exact book that someone else wrote, but you want other similar books. Okay, what stops the literary agent or the publisher from taking your concept and running it with themselves? Nothing. Nothing. There isn't. There's no non-disclosure here. They can do that, but they can't write the book you're going to write. Even if you and I write a book, and let's say we're from the same proposal, they're going to be pretty different books. They are. And is it possible that someone will steal your book idea? Yeah. It's more likely that somebody had a similar book idea at the same exact time, and it looks just like yours, but it's possible. Yeah, it is. Now, notice I say at the very bottom, fiction's different. Okay, I haven't written fiction before. I have no real interest. Maybe I will someday. With fiction, you write the book first, then you find a publisher, usually through an agent or you self-publish. But it's different with fiction. So, from my last book proposal, here's some actual excerpts on competitive information. Now, I've got to tell you, there really isn't another book like Infosec Rockstar that focuses on the non-technical skills, which I believe are equally important to successful information security people. I found the most similar books, right? I gave a sentence or two about the book, how my book was different, who wrote it, when it was published and by whom. And I actually mentioned 6 different books, right? Just like a paragraph on each. So here's 4 of them, and you do have a copy of these slides. Now, did I read these books? Some of them. Most of them I just read about them and read the reviews and did most of my searching on Amazon. Now, if you've got a good physical bookstore near you and there isn't a pandemic going on, I think it's also great to go to a physical bookstore, because sometimes you just might find some things you're not finding by doing, keyword and category searches and so forth online. But there've got to be books like yours. Why? Because otherwise, maybe there's no market. Maybe nobody's interested in books like that. Sometimes it might be a stretch to show the other books are somewhat similar to yours, but there've got to be some other books like it, right? If you write a book and there's no book remotely similar in any way, form, or manner, maybe there shouldn't be, right? Maybe no one cares. Platform is also critical. Now, this paragraph is word for word from Infosec Rockstar for that proposal. I have a growing email list of approximately 1,000 people. Now, my list was much bigger, and I said that, but I said over 1,000 people had expressed interest in this topic. The one thing my publisher loved was speaking over 50 times a year. They went crazy over that. Now, if I had said 5 times, they probably would have liked that too. Now, the fact that I'd run a class on the topic 3 times in the past and fine-tuned it, and they weren't as interested in that, but that mattered, right? I also mentioned with a previous book, I had gotten a lot of press on the book. I had talked a lot. I'd been quoted in the Wall Street Journal and the San Francisco Herald, and I'm getting newspaper titles wrong and so forth, and that mattered as well. But they want to know what your platform is. And now I definitely mentioned Twitter. Twitter actually sold a lot of my current book. Yeah. Why does the platform matter? Because it's your job to market the book, to get it to sell. Publisher gets you into distribution channels. They're really, really good at that. And they might have marketing and publicity people, but they might have like one person, and they might publish 500 books a year or 1,000 books a year. So maybe get 2 hours of their time, if that. Now, with a commercial publisher, you usually get a so-called advance on royalties. Not always. There are different models out there. For mere mortals like us, right, someone that's not a celebrity, not famous, maybe $3,000 to $10,000. Last commercially, my first book, I got $25,000, but there were 2 of us. We split it. The next book, it was 1,000. I used a different model with my next book. Now, if you've got a good agent, you will never get a royalty check afterwards. You know why? Because they've gotten you an incredible advance. If you work through the advance, meaning earn it back from royalties, what that means is you'll start getting royalty checks. So there's a guy, a publisher I rather enjoy, an author. I'm going to write his name in the notes. John Acuff. I think his last book was called Finish. Can't remember. He's great. I just watched a YouTube video he just put out where a book that he sold, I think, 90,000 copies of. And I realize most books sell maybe a couple thousand copies if you're lucky. He just got a royalty check for $77. Okay, so the money doesn't come from royalties. Okay, but I'll take the $3,000 to $10,000 plus getting my book out there. Now, with my last proposal, a lot of publishers didn't like it. Okay, so I like O'Reilly. I mentioned. I think they've got great books and so forth. Right. I am a pretty big fan of O'Reilly. Their chief guy there, who's a friend from a different area, he actively disliked my idea. He hated the idea. Tried to talk me out of pursuing it with anyone else either. So an enormously popular book series, I never read it, but it's called Chicken Soup for the Soul. I see the books everywhere, right? I've met one of the guys, John Victor, I can't think of his last name. He's one of the two authors of it. It's an entire book series now, right? They even have their own branded dog food, never mind other stuff. Do you know that there were dozens and dozens and dozens of publishers that turned it down, that hated the idea? I can't remember if it was in the high 40s or 50 something. Now, do you give up at some point? Well, yeah, you may. You might have a bad idea. I've had bad ideas for books before that I've been talked out of, but just because people don't initially like it doesn't mean it's a bad idea. Now, if you're self-publishing, which is a great option these days, obviously there's nobody waiting for a proposal, but I strongly recommend you write one anyway. Doesn't have to be as formal, doesn't have to be proofread and so forth. There better be competition, right? There better be other books somewhat like yours, seeing that there's a market. Now, your book needs to be different somehow, it needs to differ. And as I said before, even if two people write a book from the same description, they're going to be pretty different books. They are, because your personality, your thoughts, your examples, and so forth will be in the book. Platform, how are you going to get the book to sell? A lot of self-published books sell way under 200 copies. Now, depending on your goals, that might be okay. Sometimes people will write a book for whatever reason, and it might not be to sell a lot. So, simple example, there's a guy named Tom Chappell. Tom Chappell used to run a company called Tom's of Maine. They were very early in the organic healthcare product space. They're organic toothpaste, and they still exist, right? If you look on Amazon, Tom's of Maine products are all over the place. Well, Tom started a side project called the Saltwater Institute. It had to do with ethics in business and how ethical companies, in his belief, are more successful than other ones. And his book had great ideas in it. Tom should have used an editor. Tom has a love of commas. An editor would have taken out 75% of the commas. His book has 3 reviews on Amazon. Okay, not many people read it, but you know what the whole goal of that book was? To promote the Saltwater Institute. And his business guy, who's actually a friend of mine, he's in the solar industry now, would mail the book, the physical book, to people, and then call them a week later to talk to them about it. He ended up getting like appointments to talk to them about this idea to help promote it. So his idea was not to sell a lot of books. He didn't care. He wanted to spread the ideas, and the book was just one vehicle. Personally, if I'm going to write a book, I want as many people to read it as makes sense, right, as possible. Now, I said I want to talk to you about the actual writing. Okay, I'm going to talk about what works for me What doesn't work for me, and I'm saying for me because I know these work for me and don't work for me, and I've also talked to, last 6 months, at least 30 other authors in our space. And although people said different things in general, there's a lot of agreement with what works and what doesn't work. First of all, I like to sketch out the general book, right? Guess what? The book proposal does this. Even before the book proposal, I do this. Now, I do this on paper. I like paper. I don't expect what I sketch out to actually be what I actually end up doing because things change. That's okay. You actually need to sit down and write. Oh boy, I have trouble sitting still. I have trouble sitting still in writing. Now, maybe you don't actually need to physically write it, but you usually do. I just finished chapter 4 out of 5 chapters of my upcoming book. Before this happened, and guess what? I have some more dedicated time at 4 p.m. tonight. At 4 p.m., my daughter's going to be gone. She's going off to crew. I'm going to sit and write for at least an hour. And an hour might mean 45 minutes with me jumping up in the middle to go to the bathroom or get a cup of coffee or something like that. I found deadlines work if they're real deadlines, meaning there's another human involved. Could be a publisher at a deadline. Could be you've told a friend that you're going to have a copy for them to review, or an editor or something like that. What doesn't work for me, I've seen this over and over, fake deadlines. I will finish chapter 3 this week. If there aren't others involved, I've seen this fail over and over for me and for others. Trying to fit writing into spare time. It's a beautiful idea, right? It just doesn't work. Even at one time, this was in February, I said, I have some spare time every day. That's not necessarily that true, but I said it was true. I will write some every day, and I will track it on a calendar. I will write at least 5 minutes every day. That entire month, except for maybe one day, I ended up sitting and writing. I ended up writing very little because it's like 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there. Not much happens. Scheduling writing time works. My second book, I wrote at night. It was the only chance I had. I had little children and a hectic life. And when we get to bed, I remember at the end, I had a real deadline with a publisher. I'm going to guess there were 80 nights in a row where every night from when the kids were in bed until I fell asleep or passed out at the table, which happened, I was writing. I took one night off, and it was like a holiday. Writing late at night, it's tough for me. I'm a night person, and I am. I'm usually better when fresh, and I've heard this from a number of other authors who are also night people. We tend to be perfectionists in this field, right? The first draft is the first draft. It doesn't have to be good, right? It's supposed to be messy. Just get words down on paper. Just get something written down. Yeah, I have problems here all the time. You just get something down. You're going to look at it again. You're going to have editors and so forth. Also, overthinking it. I'm not the only one here that tends to overthink things. Just write. Just get stuff down on paper. Now, could you give yourself a head start? Let's say, and I'm not doing this, but let's say I wanted to write a book on writing an Infosec book, right? There are books on writing books. Okay, this is an hour-long presentation, roughly. An hour is about 9,000 words. I could take this and have it transcribed. Or let's say something maybe more practical. Let's say I wanted to write an introductory book on cryptography, okay? I gave a webinar on cryptography. It was an hour. That's about 9,000 words. And not that long ago, probably 2 or 3 years now, but I gave a 2-hour talk, and it was my material, right? My proprietary material, not someone else's course I was teaching, to a local user group as part of a CISSP study group that they had. If I took those 2 hours of audio, and they're recorded, I transcribed them. I wouldn't transcribe them myself, right? I'd have somebody else do it. That's about 18,000 words, right? A lot of books are 35 to 50,000 words. That's That's a good size, right? That's like half a traditional book, and that might be long enough. So what if you don't give conference talks? What if you don't talk to user groups? What if you don't do webinars? You could produce the content bit by bit. Maybe it's blog posts. Maybe it's Facebook Lives. Right? I haven't done a Facebook Live yet, but I probably will. Or maybe, streaming on YouTube. Or you could do short YouTube videos. Right? Just produce the content bit by bit. Now, one of the great things here is this helps you get feedback. Yeah. As a matter of fact, there's even a book out there by Seth Godin. Now, Seth is one of my favorite non-Infosec authors. Try to remember the name of the book. It's called something like, now what are you going to do with all those ducks? Based on things like when I get all my ducks in a row, I'll do this. And his whole thing is, well, you got to start doing things. You don't wait to start doing things. His entire book is a bunch of unedited blog posts. And it's a pretty interesting book too. Right? So that could actually be the book itself. Now, my last two books actually started as conference talks, right? Including the one I'm working on now on how to be a consultant in security. The talks definitely got better over time. If I take a look at my first Infosec Rockstar talk, at least in my mind, it was embarrassing. People liked it, but it was definitely better when I'd given the talk 5 or 10 times. I had spin-off talks as well. Right now, in both cases, both that my consulting one, I've written a class based on the talk, absolutely not necessary, and the book is based on the class. Right, a lot of recordings of the class transcribed, forming some of the material. Certainly not all of it, but some of it. For those of you that don't like to write, you can probably speak, right? You can speak the book. You could actually just speak it and have others transcribe it. Now, you can have somebody interview you. That's a common technique. Get a friend, tell them, look, this is what I want to have in the book. This is what I want to cover, and have them talk to you, right? And just record it. Do it over Zoom, for example, or something like that. You could do that. Then you could have it transcribed. Then you could even have editors take it without even touching the words. I'm assuming you're probably going to touch some of the words yourselves, do some actual writing. Now, I mentioned an hour spoken is about 9,000 words. My last book was about 50,000 words. A lot of commercially published books are between 35,000 and 55,000 words. But what makes a book valuable is not how many words are in the book, but how much value it provides. I read a book 3 weeks ago. A friend of mine wrote it, gave it to me. It's about 9,000 words, right? And the book looks bigger than it is because it's got some blank pages in there for you to fill in your thoughts as you go on and so forth. It's pretty good. And he put that together really quickly. You could also go and interview other people. So there's 3 Tribe of Hackers books out there, right? 3 Tribe of Hackers. Marcus, I don't know personally, but we interact sometimes on Twitter. I certainly pay attention to him. Jennifer, the other author, I do not know. But they just went and got a bunch of different people for each of the books and talked to them, interviewed them. Now, I think that was actually a written interview. I think they sent them written questions, like 5 questions or something like that, and lightly edited them afterwards. And I'll tell you, I've only read one of the 3 books, but it's a good book. I'll probably read the other 2s afterward. The second book I wrote was called, are you ready for a horrible name? What No One Ever Tells You About. And that was the name of the series from Dearborn Publishing, now part of Kaplan. What No One Ever Tells You About Blogging and Podcasting. Right? It was like 14 years ago. It was on new social media. I went and I interviewed 101 people. I just talked to 101 people. Like 20 of them I probably would have talked to anyway. And I took what they said and I just wrote it into a book. Now that was actually a little more work than you might think because there's 101 of them. What if I wanted to do a follow-up to my book that mentally is finished in my head, Infosec Consulting 101, or whatever the book may be called? Could I go out there and find 25 or 35 or 40 established, successful consultants with a track record of at least 10 years in Infosec? We probably got that right at SANS. We definitely do. Could I go interview them? Maybe just send them a questionnaire in the mail, say, hey, want to help me out with this? And most people will. And could I make a book out of that? And what if I wanted to do a successful case studies of new Infosec consultant book? Could I go find 20 or 30 or 40 people that have been consulting a year or two or less, who have started well, started with a bang? I probably have that many people that have just gone through my successful Infosec consulting class, right? That's a pretty easy way to write a book. And boy, there's a lot of value in books like that. In general, creativity is absolutely acceptable here, is absolutely a fine thing. Do you actually need to write? Well, no, not really. And going on and forward, I think more and more of my books will be spoken and transcribed, and I should probably use editors more than I do. So let's back up, way up. What are you going to write about? You want to write a book? Okay. Some people say, well, what are you an expert at? That's a good thing to consider. I think more important is what you're interested in, right? What are you interested in writing about? Could be something you're currently learning. You say, well, if I'm just learning it, I'm not an expert. It's like, well, there's a bigger market for beginners, because in any area, there's always more beginners. Let's say you're writing a book on, I don't know, command line kung fu, or how about playing the guitar? Everyone understands what a guitar is, right? Of all the potential buyers for guitar books, I'm going to guess 90% of them are beginners, right? You say, oh, there's so many beginner books out there. Well, let's look at a similar field. I just listened to an interview yesterday by New York Times bestselling author J.J. Virgin. Now, J.J. Virgin, she's written at least 2 extremely popular diet books. And you might argue that every diet book is a beginner book, right? Because you start losing weight from where you are right now. That's your beginning. And say, well, there's just so many diet books out there. I don't want to write another one, but there's going to be over 1,000 diet books written every year. So even if there's something, and there's a lot of books out on there, if you're interested in it, even if you're currently learning about it, that might be a good idea. Now, also very importantly is, what are your goals with the book? So going forwards, there's 2 things I'd really like to do professionally. One is I would love to get more people consulting, because for many of us, not everybody, it's a great career option. I think we provide a lot of value by doing that. Well, the goal with my Infosec Consulting 101 book is to get more people to do that. That's a goal. And part of that goal is getting more people to take my class. Now, another thing I want to do professionally going forwards, I want to give more paid keynote speeches, right? So I'm also looking at books for the future that have good keynoting opportunities. Certainly a consulting book, it may be for entrepreneurial conferences and some other conferences, right? But if I want to give more keynotes, what do people tend to hire keynote speakers to talk about? How does that market work? How might a book fit in with those goals? And I love that bottom statement. Write the book you want to read. Yeah, that's why I wrote Infosec Rockstar. That's why I wrote my last book. I wrote the book I wanted to read. So I'm going to claim nothing's more powerful than a book, right? And anyone can write one. Literally anyone? Well, maybe not anyone, but almost anyone, right? If you're here, you can write one. You're capable of writing a book. Now, realize it's a bunch of work, right? It is a bunch of work. It doesn't just happen. It doesn't have to, it may be more work than you think, but it's also far more possible than you think. If you're a full-time employee, right, you want to break into consulting, boy, will this help. Let's say you're a full-time employee, you want to break into a related field. Let's say you're in IT, but you want to be in security, even though you do some work in security. You'd write a book on it, right, on what you know. It might be a beginner book, might not. And remember, author is the root word of authority, right? You heard the saying before, well, they wrote the book on the topic. And sometimes it means they literally wrote the book or a book. Sometimes it just means they're like a total authority on that topic. So continuing forwards, what do? What would I recommend? After this, just take a few minutes, just jot down. Again, I like paper. A list of possible topics. Say, yeah, it'd be really cool if I wrote a book on this or this or this. Not looking at how practical it is. It may or may not be practical, right? There's some books I'd probably be fascinated to write that I can't. It's just I don't have the base knowledge. I just don't have the background. Look for similar books. Right, this can both help spark ideas and also help let you know that, yeah, people are interested in this topic. And if there are no books on the topic, nothing remotely close, well, maybe, just maybe you're way ahead of the curve. That's possible. Or more likely, nobody's really interested in a book on this topic, or nobody maybe is as interested as you. That's very possible as well. Right, consider options. These can include writing a book with others. My first book I wrote with a co-author. There's also books out there that have 4 or 5 authors contributing different chapters. Boy, that can make it a lot easier. That can also be difficult, right? Because you got to get them to merge together. And remember, it's possible. You can definitely write a book. There's no question. And a valuable book could even be 9,000 words. I was actually rearranging stuff in my house, moving bookcases quite literally this morning. I found 3 books. I want to say they're less than 10,000 words, and they're pretty awesome books. No, 4 books, because I can see one right from right where I'm sitting right now. So a book can be small. It doesn't have to be 50,000 words or 100,000 words to be valuable. So feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. You can find me on Twitter at Ted Demop. My supporting website for the last book. I've got 2 SANS classes coming up as well, 2 security essentials. I'm psyched about these because they're online, which is good now, and they're taught over more than 1 week. People often say that SANS classes are really intense, and they are. Now, there's one reason I'm mentioning I have these 2 upcoming classes, other than I want people to sign up and take the classes because I think they're awesome. If I took that class as an example, took any one section in the class, and each section is maybe an hour, maybe say 45 minutes to an hour and 15 minutes, any one of those could be a book topic. Yeah, absolutely could be. So it's like say, you can write a book, right? I know some of you, because you've emailed me or contacted me, definitely want to. Others you are thinking about it at some point. I also know some of you think, I'm not ready to write a book yet. I want to write a book. I don't know enough yet. You don't need to be an expert. You build expertise as you write a book. Remember, the biggest market is for beginner books. Don't want to scare you away from writing a more advanced book at all. And with that, I'll say thank you. I'm going to make sure there aren't any questions here. Any questions, please type them in. I will answer them. If not, the one thing I haven't put here, which I will write into the chat window, is my email address. I meant to put that up. It's ted@demop.com. Feel free to email me. I do answer email. I don't always answer in a timely fashion. If I'm teaching, sometimes I'm 200 emails behind and so forth, but I do. So thank you, everybody.
Hey, Ted, I do see one question here. It says, what stops the literary agent of the publisher from taking your... Oh, I think maybe you
I did. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay,
Nothing
sorry.
stops them, but they can't write the book you're going to write, even with the same draft.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Ted, for your great presentation, which helps bring this content to the SANS community. To our audience, we greatly appreciate you listening in. For a schedule of all upcoming and archived SANS webcasts, including this one, please visit sans.org/webcasts. Until next time, take care, and we hope to have you back again for the next SANS webcast.
Thanks, everyone.